This video is brought to you by Magic Spoon. What's up guys, Michael here. Given the general state of things in the live-action hellscape of 2021, it makes sense that a lot of us would look to the lighter, brighter world of animation for some wholesome escapism. However, it seems like recently our cartoon buddies are going through it just as badly as we are. Whether they're suffering from addiction issues, coping with toxic familial relationships, or navigating systemic sexism, the cartoon characters in our favorite recent adult animation shows seem to be dealing with just about every dark subject under the sun. So, with the boundless possibilities which animation offers, why are we gravitating towards characters who are working through real-life traumatic experiences? And in doing so, have we actually found a way to use adult animation as a kind of therapy? Let's talk about it in this Wisecrack Edition on why adult animation feels like therapy. Spoilers ahead for a bunch of sad cartoon people / animals. But before we get into it, I'm going to take a quick break to enjoy a bowl of Magic Spoon cereal. Now, as an adult, eating the cereals I liked as a kid makes me feel sick and tired, which is a huge bummer. Because as a kid, a big bowl of cereal was something I loved so much, and it gave me energy throughout the day. Now, most cereals are just sugar bombs. So as an adult, I was bound to crash by midday, if not earlier. But today's sponsor, Magic Spoon, is a delicious, keto-friendly, gluten-free, and grain-free cereal that gives me the boost I need. It tastes like the cereal I loved as a kid, but it doesn't ruin my day as an adult. In fact, it makes it better, thanks to its 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each 140-calorie serving. My favorite is cinnamon, but you can get cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, and other great flavors. Plus, Magic Spoon drops limited edition cereals all the time. And sometimes they're so popular, they come back for good, like the maple waffle and cookies and cream varieties. If you're ready to try it for yourself, then click the link below to get some Magic Spoon cereal today. You can build your very own variety box, and if you use code Wisecrack, you can get $5 off. Magic Spoon is so confident in their cereal, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Go ahead and click the link below to get $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/wisecrack to save $5 off your order today. And great news for our viewers in Canada and the UK, Magic Spoon now ships to you too, so try it out. Find your favorite flavor. And now, back to the show. Now, before we can break down recent trends in adult animation, we need to take a look at its past. Contrary to popular knowledge, early animation was pretty adulty, featuring raunchy, boozy, and sometimes straight-up terrifying content. Note, we cover this extensively in our Origins of Adult Animation video, so be sure to check it out. With the rising number of American households with TVs, animation began to be specifically marketed towards kids, with the occasional family-friendly exception like the Flintstones. Of course, Fred and his prehistoric pals were rarely dealing with anything quite as heavy as today's characters. Well, except for that episode about infertility, which was over my childhood head.
We're so anxious to have a baby, we take it out on Fred and Wilma.
The show was mostly just about a simple fella who liked to eat, bowl, and convert animals into household appliances.
It's a living.
A true everyman. What's more, the Flintstones is basically just an animated take on domestic sitcoms like The Honeymooners. And even when The Simpsons arrived to shake things up almost 30 years later, this was still the template they were working from. Not that The Simpsons never got dark.
Like my loafers, former gophers. It was that who skinned my chauffeurs, but a greyhound for tuxedo would be best.
The third episode has Homer on the verge of killing himself after all.
By the time you read this, I will be in my watery grave.
But the show was more interested in the little flaws and foibles of lower middle class life in America than the depths of human suffering. And no matter how somber the subject matter of any given episode might be, it still functioned in that classic sitcom mold. You were guaranteed that everything would be wrapped up neatly before the end credits rolled. Well, almost always.
Come on, say something conclusive!
I'm afraid this is a very open-ended problem.
The success of The Simpsons spawned a whole wave of animated shows designed to appeal to an older audience, with the likes of South Park and Family Guy making it explicitly clear that they were not for children. And I do mean explicitly.
Peaches! Peaches, I'm sorry.
Damn it! You could have at least given me
some warning.
But while these shows were comfortable wading into darker waters than The Simpsons, with whole episodes dedicated to topics like sexual harassment, child abuse, and racism, they largely did so in the name of subversion and satire. This was typically hilarious and even insightful, but which was unlikely to tell you much about what it meant to be a real person navigating any of the subjects they discussed. They were very smart, but didn't do much for audiences looking for sincere emotional pathos. It's the difference between watching Kenny die for the 100th time and watching BoJack Horseman character Sarah Lynn die once, an experience from which I will probably never recover.
Right, Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn?
Suffice to say, you're likely not shooting to provoke intense emotions if, say, you're also a show that's happy to have one of your lead characters feed another kid's parents to him via a bowl of chili.
I made you eat your parents.
The point of this kind of adult animation was to use the looser boundaries of the medium to go completely balls to the wall, putting things on screen that would either be physically impossible or extremely illegal if done by an actual human being. It was about leaning into the chaos to mine comedy from all the darkest, most f***ed up stuff the writers could come up with. And it was okay to laugh at it all because ultimately, they were just cartoons, right? But in more recent years, we've seen more and more shows ask us to emotionally invest in our animated friends at a much deeper level. Adult animation is still as wild as it's ever been. One glance at Rick and Morty's phone-munching chair people or Tuca and Bertie's turtle-hoarding neighbor will tell you that. But they've integrated some of the harshest parts of our reality into their own colorful worlds. The prime example is BoJack Horseman, which despite its constant punning and weird animal antics, is basically a whole show about depression. It explores mental illness in a way that often veers into the territory of addiction.
Is this like an AA thing?
No, I don't need AA.
Childhood trauma. PTSD. And a host of other places where unhappiness can take root. Similarly, Big Mouth's animated middle school hijinks allow it to dig into the messy parts of adolescence, as well as the psychological toll that divorce can take on a kid. And Rick and Morty might go on adventures through a multiverse full of giant butts and greasy grandmas, but the heart of their story is usually about self-hatred, despair, and broken relationships. And even a show as visually delightful and formally playful as Tuca and Bertie still finds a way to deal with painful subjects like sexual assault.
Tuca, I have to tell you something.
So whichever present-day adult animated series you're into, it's safe to say that we've come a long way from the gentle rhythms and easy resolutions of Bedrock and Springfield, and that where we are now is a hell of a lot darker. So the big question is, why? Why would we look towards places full of talking animals and shame wizards to explore the harsher parts of the human experience? Part of the appeal might have to do with the medium of animation. Animated characters have an inherent sort of universality about them. In animation, genre, and authorship, scholar and artist Paul Wells summarizes psychoanalyst Martin Grosjean, writing that the animated figure works as a symbol that transcends materiality but makes material impact. Essentially, cartoons can actually be easier for us to project ourselves onto because they're not real. I mean, have you ever felt more seen by a flesh and blood human being than you have looking at the "this is fine" dog? Similarly, animation expert Professor Paul Wells has said that animation itself creates a space for characters or phenomena to operate on more symbolic or metaphoric terms and conditions, which invites a greater degree of possibly highly charged emotive or abstract interpretation. Animation is, by nature, a bunch of symbols that we've created to represent reality. So it kind of makes sense that we'd be inclined to engage with them on a metaphorical level, even if some of those symbols are things like sperm monsters and centaurs. Animation is also far less beholden to logic than most other mainstream entertainment. We'll gladly accept characters surviving things that should kill them, or entire cities being flattened and then instantly rebuilt, just so long as everyone involved is made of ink. And on a different level, it's also less beholden to the dominant logic of our societies. So Rick and Morty can point out economic exploitation in a way that would make a live-action comedy feel like a huge bummer.
Does he like it? It's a metaphor for capitalism, Morty. What do you think?
What's more, being less tethered to reality often allows animated shows to evoke their characters' feelings and mental states much more directly, something which BoJack Horseman was always uncomfortably great at. Think about the opening credits, where we watch him float through scenes from his life in an emotionally detached haze. Later, we come to understand it's his primary defense mechanism. Or consider the incredible, almost wordless underwater episode, where Bojack is forced to navigate a world he doesn't understand without being able to talk, emphasizing his emotional isolation. Or think about the increasingly abstracted visuals used to portray his emotional breakdown in Season 5, allowing us to experience the disintegration of reality right alongside him. In one such episode, the full immersive capacity of animation allows for his co-star and girlfriend Gina's cliché show tune song to read as dark and menacing, complete with dancing popsicles. Part of the reason we were able to get such a rich understanding of Bojack as a character was because the entire show could be warped to reflect his interior life and make it visible to the viewer.
Has anyone ever come back from this place?
BJ, there is no place. It's just your brain going through what it feels like it has to go through.
And this is true whether he's running through the washed-out imagery of his youth or watching Diane, the only person to ever effectively call him out on his bullshit, turn into a terrifying monster. Of course, it goes without saying that adult animation's introspective possibilities for achieving subjectivity also makes it very good at depicting drug experiences. Similar tactics have been employed by a host of other adult animated shows too. Big Mouth was able to make a full-blown musical spectacle out of a young woman's first period. This reflects how, from Jessie's point of view, having everyone know she was on her period felt about as seismic and humiliating as being followed by a giant singing tampon. In Tuca and Birdie, quote-unquote reality is similarly malleable. When gentrification threatens their neighborhood, it's symbolized by a pervasive moss that creeps into the bird's apartment building. When Tuca brushes fingers with her crush, she's so excited that her bones literally fall out, and Birdie has to pick them up, which is what a brush with a crush truly feels like, isn't it? And of course, there's the show's deft handling of Birdie's sexual assault when she was 12. The show's normally chaotic animation style falls away in favor of a pared down color palette and faceless figures. And it's the magic of animation that lets us truly see the experience from the victim's perspective. There's also the various outlandish ways the Boondocks found to use Japanese anime style to explore Black American trauma. Sometimes that means bringing Martin Luther King Jr. back to life to comment on contemporary Black culture, something that might border on sacrilege if employed in live action. And frequently, that means empowering its central character, Huey, to engage in gravity-defying fight scenes that, in their outlandishness, paradoxically manage to accurately reflect the full scope of his inner power and rage. When you take a look around, the anything-goes nature of animation actually allows it to aim directly at the stuff that's the most real. Okay, so that might explain why animation is so effective at exploring the inner lives of its characters. But that still leaves the bigger question: why do we care? Why do we seem to get so much value out of watching animated characters process their pain? If you were to ask ancient Greece's biggest intellectual show-off, Aristotle, he might tell you that it's all about catharsis. That watching characters undergo tragedy provides us with a vital release for our own feelings of sadness, fear, and anger. And while many parts of these shows may be symbolic, they tend to get very literal when it comes to darker issues. We might not know what it's like to have our fiancé stolen by a cyborg, or our wife killed by a version of ourselves from another dimension, but we've got plenty of experience with the other issues which affect these characters. Rick, Archer, and Bojack all struggle with alcohol issues, as do about 6% of American adults. And 1 out of every 9 Americans over the age of 65 suffers from the sort of dementia that's so brutally portrayed in Bojack. And over 400,000 more Americans each year will sadly be able to relate far too easily to the experience of sexual assault in Tuca and Birdie. In their journey through the darker corners of existence, these shows will almost certainly bump up on something that either the viewer or someone in their life has dealt with, making it all powerfully, painfully real. But what really makes these animated shows hit quite so hard? It's probably all the hours we spent staring square-eyed at cartoons while we were children. And it turns out our parents were right that all that TV time would mess us up. My bad, Dad. Although they probably just thought it would ruin our eyes and attention spans, not that we would one day be emotionally ruined by watching a horseman accidentally seducing a teenage deer, so actually, never mind, Dad. I take it back. Animated shows carry an even greater pathos for those of us who grew up watching them, because they present what Wells describes as the fictionalized notion of consciousness, which, if imagined real, both recalls the playful and liberal apparatus of childhood and makes concrete the irony and contradiction of the adult sensibility. What that means is that adult animation occupies a sort of liminal space that splits the difference between the fond childhood memories which the medium recalls and the brutal adult realities which modern shows portray. So we come to these shows with all the emotional openness of a sweet summer child, only to be met with the the wall-to-wall adult misery that's on display. And it might even be more than that, because in our softened cartoon-watching state, we aren't braced for an emotional gut punch the way we are checking out a prestige live-action series over on HBO. So when we watch bojack strangling his co-star while in the midst of a drug-addled nervous breakdown, or come face-to-face with the crushing sadness of Woodhouse's death in Archer, it can catch us completely off guard.
And he had a good long life. He did. For a heroin addict.
The anything-goes, consequence-free antics of our Looney Tunes days suddenly gives way to the absolute reality of what's happening to the characters on screen. And we're forced to accept that the wounds being made won't just be erased and replaced for the next frame. They're here to stay, every bit as permanent as the marks we make in real life. Of course, you can always just pull a Rick Sanchez and reject this sort of therapeutic value right out of hand.
I don't think going to a rented office in a strip mall to listen to some agent of averageness explain which words mean which feelings has ever helped anyone do anything. I think it's helped a lot of people get comfortable and stop panicking, which is a state of mind we value in the animals we eat, but not something I want for myself.
But to do so would surely be missing a large part of what these shows have to offer. We're in the midst of a golden age of adult animation thanks to a bunch of shows with a lot on their minds. And it seems like it's the same stuff that a lot of us are going through too. So maybe we can work through life's more painful aspects together with a few badass action sequences, bizarre musical numbers, and outlandish sight gags thrown in to let us have some fun along the way. But what do you guys think? Why do shows like bojack Horseman seem to f us up so much more than shows which don't include asexual axolotls and strip dancing orcas? Feel free to play Armchair Psychologist down in the comments. Thanks as always to our patrons for all your support, and remember to check out our podcast. Hit that subscribe button like your birdie punching pastry dough, and don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Later.